"Your brother deserves the company more," my mother declared, her voice sharp enough to slice through the tension hanging in our family dining room. The words stung, but they didn't surprise me. I met her gaze steadily, watching as she pushed my father's will across the polished mahogany table where we'd shared Sunday dinners my entire life. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the company no longer existed as they understood it. 3 days earlier, in a sunlit conference room overlooking the harbor, I had signed papers that changed everything. The weight of the cashier's check for $28 million still felt heavy in my handbag, like a secret too big for its container. "I understand how you feel, Mom," I said, my voice calm despite the storm inside me. My brother Marcus leaned back in his chair, not even trying to hide his satisfied smile. And in that moment, watching them both assume they'd won a battle I'd already conceded on my own terms, I realized this wasn't just about a family business. This was about finally being seen for who I really was. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Vanessa Mitchell, and until 6 weeks ago, I was the invisible backbone of Mitchell Fine Foods, a specialty food distribution company my father built from nothing over 30 years. While my brother Marcus handled sales with his natural charm, and my father served as the company's beloved face, I managed operations, finances, and strategy from behind the scenes. I implemented our inventory tracking system, negotiated our best supplier contracts, and developed the direct-to-restaurant program that doubled our revenue in 3 years. The irony wasn't lost on me. In a company bearing our family name, I was often mistaken for an assistant rather than an executive by new clients. "You must be so proud to work for the Mitchells," they'd say, and I'd smile politely while my father or brother failed to correct them. It was a familiar dance, one I'd performed since joining the company after completing my MBA with honors from Northwestern. The morning Dad died, I was reviewing quarterly projections in my office. The spreadsheets showed exactly what I'd expected. Another record-breaking quarter, largely due to the specialty cheese import program I'd established the previous year. My assistant knocked on my door, her face pale. "Your father collapsed in the warehouse," she whispered. "The ambulance is on its way." I ran through the building, my heels echoing on the concrete floor. Dad was lying near the loading dock, surrounded by horrified employees. By the time the paramedics arrived, he was already gone. A massive heart attack at 65. The funeral showcased the Mitchell family dynamics perfectly. Marcus delivered a moving eulogy that had everyone reaching for tissues, while I organized the service, coordinated with vendors, and made sure the catering arrived on time. My mother clung to Marcus throughout, her grief-stricken face turning to him for comfort. I handled the logistics of loss while they embodied it. "Your father was so proud of both of you," people murmured as they hugged us at the reception. But I noticed how their eyes lingered on Marcus, the golden son who'd inherited Dad's charisma and easy laugh. 2 weeks after we buried Dad, Jessica Winters, our family attorney, called us into her office for the reading of the will. I expected a straightforward division, perhaps a slight advantage to Marcus as the firstborn and my father's favorite. What happened instead sent shockwaves through our family. "To my daughter Vanessa," Jessica read from my father's will, "I leave controlling interest in Mitchell Fine Foods, representing 60% of company shares." The silence in the room was absolute. My mother's intake of breath sounded like a gasp of pain. Marcus stared at Jessica as if she had misread. "There must be a mistake," my mother said, looking to Jessica for confirmation. "There's no mistake, Mrs. Mitchell," Jessica replied calmly. "Robert updated his will 8 months ago. He was very specific about his wishes." "But Marcus has always been the one meant to take over," my mother protested. "He's been training with Robert since college." I sat perfectly still, my face betraying nothing while my mind raced. My father had never hinted at this decision. We'd never discussed succession planning beyond vague mentions of the future and family legacy. Why would he make such a momentous choice without talking to me first? There's more, Jessica continued. Robert left a letter for Vanessa to be read privately. After the others left, my mother in tears, Marcus in stony silence, Jessica handed me a sealed envelope. My father's handwriting on the front simply said Nessa, his childhood nickname for me. "I've known your father a long time," Jessica said, watching me hold the envelope without opening it. "He wasn't a man who made decisions lightly." In my car, parked outside Jessica's office, I finally broke the seal. The letter was brief, written in my father's distinctive scrawl. "Nessa, by now you know I've left you in charge. You're wondering why. The answer is simple. You're the only one who can see what needs to be done. Marcus has gifts. He makes people feel special, builds relationships, opens doors. But you build foundations. You always have, since you were a little girl constructing elaborate block towers while your brother was charming the room. I know I never said this enough, but the company stands because of you. I've watched you solve problems nobody else even recognized. That's why it has to be you. One more thing. I've seen the offers from National Foods. I never told you, but they approached me directly last year. I said no out of pride. Pride is expensive, Nessa. Sometimes the right path forward isn't the one everyone expects. Trust your judgment, even when others don't understand. With love and complete confidence, Dad." My hands trembled as I folded the letter. Tears threatened, but I blinked them back. Dad had seen me, really seen me, all along. And he'd trusted me to make decisions no one else would understand. The next morning, I arrived at the office early, before most employees. I wanted a moment alone in the building that now, somehow, was more mine than anyone else's. I walked through the quiet warehouse, past towering shelves of specialty foods from around the world, remembering how as a child I'd been fascinated by the exotic packaging and foreign languages on the labels. In my father's office, I couldn't bring myself to think of it as mine yet. I ran my fingers along the edge of his desk. The room smelled faintly of the mint tea he drank and the sandalwood aftershave he wore. On the credenza behind the desk sat dozens of photos. Marcus scoring the winning touchdown in high school, my parents on their anniversary trip to Italy, me at my MBA graduation. Dad beaming proudly in each one. My quiet moment was interrupted by the arrival of Patricia Coleman, our HR director and one of Dad's oldest friends. "I heard about the will," she said without preamble. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I replied, automatically. "Just surprised." Patricia shut the door. "Your father and I talked about this. He knew there would be resistance. From Mom and Marcus? From them, from the board, from key clients who are used to dealing with your brother." She hesitated. "Vanessa, I don't mean to add pressure, but you should know there's already talk. Marcus had lunch with the executive team yesterday after the will reading. He implied the arrangement was temporary, that you'd be stepping aside once the emotional decision had time to settle." A familiar weight settled in my stomach. Of course Marcus wouldn't accept this. He'd been told his entire life that Mitchell, fine foods would be his birthright. "Thank you for telling me," I said. Patricia reached across the desk and squeezed my hand. "Your father knew what he was doing, Vanessa. He told me once that you were the only one who understood that a family business is still a business first." After she left, I opened my laptop and navigated to a folder I'd created months ago but never accessed. Inside were detailed analyses of acquisition offers from 3 different companies, including National Foods. I'd researched them all after overhearing my father reject National's approach out of hand, telling my mother, "No outsider will ever take what I built for my children." At the time, I disagreed with his decision, but kept my opinion to myself. National Foods had distribution networks we could never match, and technological infrastructure that would cost us millions to develop. Independently, their offer had been more than fair. I hadn't realized Dad knew I'd continued researching potential buyers. I certainly hadn't known he'd reconsidered his position. But now, facing the reality of family resistance and company politics, I remembered his words from the letter. Sometimes the right path forward isn't the one everyone expects. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Family dinner tonight at Mom's. We need to discuss transition details. That evening, our family home in the suburbs felt tense and unfamiliar. Mom had prepared Dad's favorite pot roast, as if his memory might somehow mediate our conflict. Marcus arrived with Stephanie, his wife of 3 years, who greeted me with a hug that didn't reach her eyes. Let's eat first, Mom suggested, then we can talk business. Dinner conversation remained carefully neutral. Stephanie's new interior, design clients, Mom's garden club, a cousin's upcoming wedding. Only after Mom served coffee and her famous apple tart did Marcus clear his throat. So, about the company, he began. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I've been thinking about how we can make this work for everyone. I'm listening, I said, keeping my tone neutral. Dad's decision was unexpected, but I think I understand what he intended. Marcus leaned forward, his expression earnest. You've always been brilliant with the operations side, Nessa. No one disputes that. And with your controlling interest, you'd still have final say on major decisions. But, I prompted, but the company needs continuity and leadership. Our clients expect to work with me. The vendors know me. I'm the face of Mitchell Fine Foods to most people. He spread his hands. Dad probably wanted to ensure you had security and recognition. We can achieve that while still maintaining the natural order of things. The natural order? I repeated. Marcus has been groomed to take over since he joined the company, my mother interjected. Everyone has always understood that. Your father sometimes made emotional decisions near the end. I set my coffee cup down carefully. Dad changed his will 8 months ago, Mom. Well before his health declined. Look, Marcus said, his frustration showing, we can argue about Dad's intentions all night. The point is, there's a simple solution. You retain your financial interest while I take the operational lead, president and CEO. You keep your current role, maybe with a title bump to Chief Operations Officer. Everyone wins. Everyone except me, I said quietly. Don't be difficult, Vanessa, my mother sighed. Your brother has seniority. He has the relationships. He has the experience leading teams. I've been with the company just as long as Marcus, I pointed out, and I lead the operations and finance teams. That's 2/3 of our employees. It's different, Stephanie chimed in. Marcus has been the heir apparent. Clients trust him. The McNally account alone is worth millions, and Mr. McNally specifically asks for Marcus. I studied my family's faces, all so certain they were right, so convinced of the natural order they believed in. I thought of my father's letter. Trust your judgment, even when others don't understand. I need some time, I said finally. This is a big adjustment for all of us. We don't have time, Marcus pressed. The industry is changing. Regional distributors like us are getting squeezed by the nationals. We need to project stability. I nodded, not in agreement, but in acknowledgement. I'll have an answer for you by the end of the week. Driving home to my downtown apartment, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The decision that had been forming in my mind since reading Dad's letter was crystallizing into certainty. I thought of the countless meetings where my ideas were attributed to Marcus or my father. The client dinners where I was introduced as Robert's daughter, while Marcus was our future CEO. The years spent proving my worth only to have it questioned the moment I received recognition. In my home office, I opened my laptop and drafted a brief email to Caroline Vega, the acquisition specialist at National Foods, who had reached out to us periodically over the years. Caroline, I'd like to revisit discussions regarding National Foods' interest in Mitchell Fine Foods. Recent changes in our company structure have created an opportunity for reconsideration. I'm available to meet at your convenience. Regards, Vanessa Mitchell, majority shareholder, Mitchell Fine Foods. I hesitated only briefly before hitting send. By morning, I had a response scheduling a preliminary meeting for the following day. The next week passed in a carefully choreographed dance. During the day, I ran the company as if nothing had changed, authorizing purchases, reviewing contracts, meeting with our bank to discuss seasonal credit lines. I avoided direct conversations about succession planning, telling Marcus and the executive team that I was still processing everything. After hours, I met with Caroline Vega and her team at a discreet hotel conference room across town. National's offer was even better than their previous approaches. $32 million for the company, with guarantees of retained jobs for at least 2 years and a premium paid for the Mitchell name, which they plan to maintain. We've admired your distribution network and client relationships for years, Caroline explained. Your specialty foods expertise fills a gap in our portfolio. This is a natural fit. I negotiated hard on 2 points: employee retention and recognition of the team's expertise. National agreed to create a specialty foods division headquartered in our current location, retaining most employees and offering management roles to our top performers. When the final terms were set, Caroline asked the question I'd been expecting. What about your brother? Our research indicates he's a major part of client relationships. Marcus will receive his share of the proceeds as a minority stakeholder, I replied. What he does next is his decision. The final paperwork was signed on a Thursday afternoon. The sale would be announced to employees and the public the following Monday, giving legal teams time to prepare communications. I received a cashier's check for my portion of the proceeds, just over $28 million after taxes and fees, along with documentation for my brother's and mother's shares. Walking out of the National Foods headquarters, I felt oddly weightless. The company that had defined my identity for so long was no longer mine. Yet instead of grief, I felt liberation. I had made a business decision that honored my father's legacy while acknowledging market realities. The Mitchell name would continue. Our employees would have security with a growing company. And I would finally be free to define myself beyond my family's expectations. 3 days later, I sat across from my mother and brother at our family dining table, listening to her say the words that should have wounded me, but instead confirmed I'd made the right choice. Your brother deserves the company more. I understood then that no matter what I achieved, no matter what my father had intended, some perceptions would never change. The difference was that now, for the first time, I had the power to choose my own path forward. The next morning, I woke to 17 missed calls, 8 from Marcus, 5 from my mother, 3 from Stephanie, and 1 from Jessica Winters, our attorney. I silenced my phone and made coffee, taking my time as I prepared for the storm I knew was coming. The cashier's check still sat in my handbag, untouched. I needed to establish a proper financial plan before depositing such a significant amount, but part of me also recognized the psychological aspect of waiting. Once deposited, the sale would feel irrevocable in a new way. I dressed carefully in a charcoal gray suit, serious but not funereal, and drove to the office. It was early, Sunday, and I expected the building to be empty, giving me time to clear my personal items before Monday's announcement. To my surprise, Patricia Coleman's car was in the parking lot. I had a feeling you might come in today, she said when I found her in the conference room, organizing folders. Need help packing? I hesitated, then decided Patricia deserved the truth. She'd been loyal to my father and fair to me throughout my career. The company's been sold. I said quietly. National Foods. The announcement goes out tomorrow. To her credit, Patricia didn't gasp or protest. She simply nodded once, processing the information with the same efficiency she brought to everything. Your father suspected you might take this path. He mentioned it during one of our last conversations. This surprised me. He told you he thought I'd sell? He said you were the only one clear-eyed enough to recognize when holding on did more harm than good. She closed the U folder she was organizing. The regional specialty distributor model is struggling. National has resources we can't match. It's the right business decision, even if it won't be popular. Relief washed over me. Thank you for understanding. What about Marcus and your mother? They don't know yet. I was going to tell them tonight, but they're already trying to reach me after yesterday's family dinner. I suppose I should face the music sooner rather than later. Patricia squeezed my shoulder. I'll help you pack up your office while you return some calls. In the privacy of my father's office, it had never quite become mine. I finally called Jessica Winters first. Vanessa, I've received some concerning calls from your mother and brother, she began without preamble. They seem to think you're planning some sort of corporate restructuring without proper consultation. It's a bit more significant than restructuring, I admitted. I've sold Mitchell Fine Foods to National. The papers were signed Thursday. A long pause followed. I see, Jessica finally said. That explains the urgency of their calls. How did they find out? They haven't, not officially. They're worried because I didn't immediately agree to step aside in favor of Marcus during a family dinner yesterday. And you're planning to inform them? Today? I wanted one more night of peace. Jessica sighed. As your family's attorney, I need to advise you that this approach may create additional tensions. As someone who's known you since you were a child, I understand why you handled it this way. Will you be available later today? I'd like you to help explain the terms, especially regarding their shares of the proceeds. Of course, just let me know when and where. My next call was to Marcus, who answered on the first ring. Finally, he said, exasperation clear in his voice. We need to talk, Nessa. Mom's upset and frankly, so am I. This silent treatment isn't helping anyone. You're right, I replied calmly. Can you and Mom meet me at the office at noon? Jessica will join us. The office? On Sunday? I could hear his confusion. Why bring Jessica into a family discussion? It's important, Marcus, please. He agreed reluctantly. After hanging up, I sat in my father's chair, swiveling to face the window overlooking the loading docks where delivery trucks would normally be bustling on weekdays. Soon, they would bear the National Foods logo alongside the Mitchell name. Patricia helped me pack my personal items, framed diplomas, family photos, the fountain pen collection my father had started for me when I graduated from business school. We worked mostly in silence, the weight of imminent change hanging between us. What will you do next? She finally asked as we sealed the last box. The question caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on the sale, on solving the immediate problem, that I hadn't fully considered what came after. I'm not sure, I admitted. Travel, maybe. Take some time to think about what I actually want instead of what's expected of me. Patricia nodded approvingly. Good. You've earned that. At precisely noon, my mother's Mercedes pulled into the parking lot, followed by Marcus's Range Rover. Through the office window, I watched them convene briefly before walking towards the entrance, their body language tense. I met them in the reception area. Thank you for coming. Jessica's already in the conference room. What is this about, Vanessa? My mother's voice was tight with barely controlled emotion. First, you disappear after dinner. Then you're unreachable. All night, and now this mysterious Sunday meeting. Let's sit down, I said, leading them down the hallway. I'll explain everything. The conference room felt unusually formal with just the four of us. Jessica sat at the far end of the table, a folder open before her. I took the seat at the head of the table, a position I had rarely occupied in family business meetings, where my father and later Marcus typically presided. "I've asked you here because I've made a significant decision regarding Mitchell Fine Foods," I began, meeting each of their eyes in turn. "After careful consideration of market conditions, competitive pressures, and future growth potential, I've accepted an acquisition offer from National Foods Corporation." The silence that followed was absolute. My mother's hand went to her throat in a gesture so reminiscent of old movies it might have seemed theatrical if I didn't know her so well. "You've what?" Marcus finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. "The company has been sold," I repeated. "The contracts were signed Thursday. The public announcement will be made tomorrow morning." "You can't do this," my mother said, finding her voice. "This is your father's legacy, our family name." "Actually, she can," Jessica interjected gently. "As majority shareholder, Vanessa has the legal authority to approve the sale without additional votes." Marcus slammed his palm against the table. "This is exactly why Dad's decision was a mistake. You've known about this responsibility for what, 2 weeks? And you've already destroyed everything he built." I remained calm, remembering my father's words. "Trust your judgment, even when others don't understand." "I haven't destroyed anything, Marcus. The Mitchell name will continue as a premium brand within National's portfolio. Most employees will keep their positions. Our distribution center will become their specialty foods division headquarters." "And us?" My mother's voice trembled. "What happens to us?" I nodded to Jessica, who slid folders across the table to each of them. "As minority shareholders, you'll receive your proportional shares of the sale proceeds," Jessica explained. "Based on your 25% ownership, Mrs. Mitchell, your portion comes to approximately $8 million after taxes and fees. Marcus, your 15% share amounts to roughly $8 million. Marcus stared at the document, his expression shifting from anger to a shock. "8 figures? You sold for 8 figures and didn't even consult us?" "The total acquisition price was $32 million, I confirmed. "Well above market value for a regional distributor of our size. National recognizes the strength of our client relationships and specialty product line." My mother was shaking her head. "Money isn't the point, Vanessa. This company is our heritage. Your father built it for his children, for his grandchildren someday. Dad built it to provide for his family and fulfill his passion for specialty foods," I corrected gently. "And he left me in charge because he trusted me to make difficult decisions when necessary." Marcus's anger found its target again. "No. He left you in charge because he felt guilty about always favoring me. This was his way of balancing the scales, but he never would have expected you to sell out at the first opportunity." "This wasn't the first opportunity," I replied, keeping my voice level. "National has been approaching us for years. Dad turned them down out of emotional attachment, but he knew it might eventually be necessary. In fact, he mentioned it in his letter to me." "What letter?" my mother demanded. "A private letter Dad left with his will. He told me to trust my judgment, even when others didn't understand." I turned to Marcus. "And this wasn't a rash decision. I've spent years analyzing our market position. Regional specialty distributors are being squeezed from all sides. Large nationals taking the big accounts. Direct-to-consumer startups capturing the small ones. We've been profitable, but our growth has stalled." "We could have adapted," Marcus insisted. "Found new markets, developed new strategies. That would require significant capital investment. Capital we'd have to borrow against the business at unfavorable rates given current market conditions. I'd run these numbers dozens of times over the past year. This sale ensures the Mitchell legacy continues with proper resources behind it, while providing financial security for everyone." Jessica cleared her throat. "If I may, the terms Vanessa negotiated are exceptional. Employee retention guarantees, brand preservation, local operation maintenance. These are concessions acquirers rarely make. My mother was still shaking her head, tears flowing freely now. I can't believe you would do this without discussing it with us first. Your father would be so disappointed. Her words stung despite my preparation for them. I made a business decision, Mom. The same kind Dad made dozens of times throughout his career. It wasn't just a business, she insisted. It was our life, our identity. And that's precisely the problem, I said, finally letting some emotion into my voice. This company became so wrapped up in our identities that we couldn't see it objectively anymore. We couldn't see that it might have more value transformed than preserved exactly as Dad left it. Marcus was flipping through the document, his initial anger giving way to calculation. What about executive positions with National? Did you negotiate? Roles for family members? The question was so characteristically Marcus, always looking for his place, his title, his recognition, that I almost laughed despite the tension. National would be open to discussions regarding your continued involvement, particularly in client relationship management. They value the connections you've built. He nodded slowly, processing this information with new interest. My mother noticed his shift in attention and looked betrayed. You can't possibly be considering working for the people who bought our company, Marcus. I'm considering all options, Mom, he replied, not meeting her eyes. 8 figures provides opportunities, but continuing with National might make sense for my career. The meeting continued for another hour. Jessica explained the legal details while I outlined the transition plan. My mother eventually stopped protesting and retreated into silent disapproval. Marcus's questions became increasingly practical. Tax implications, timeline for receiving funds, potential executive compensation packages with National. By the time we finished, late afternoon shadows stretched across the conference room. My mother stood to leave, gathering her purse with deliberate movements. I need time to process this, she said stiffly. I hope someday you'll understand what you've done, Vanessa. After they left, Jessica stayed behind to help me finalize some paperwork. That went about as well as could be expected, she observed. Better than I feared, worse than I hoped, I agreed. Your father knew this would be difficult. That's why he gave you controlling interest outright instead of creating a trust or imposing conditions. He had complete faith in you. I thought about the weight of that faith as I drove home through the quiet Sunday streets. The confidence my father had shown in me was both gift and burden. He had seen me clearly enough to know I would make unpopular but necessary decisions. The question that haunted me now was, beyond solving this immediate business problem, what did I actually want for myself? My apartment felt strange that evening, both familiar and somehow foreign, as if I were seeing it through new eyes. For so long, my identity had been defined by Mitchell Fine Foods just as much as my mother's and brother's had been. Executive, problem solver, behind-the-scenes operator. Now, those roles were gone, and the void they left was both terrifying and exhilarating. On Monday morning, I arrived at the office early to help coordinate the announcement. Caroline Vega and her team from National Foods were already in the conference room, reviewing presentation materials. At 9 o'clock, we gathered all employees in the warehouse, the only space large enough to accommodate everyone. I stepped up to the podium first, surveying the faces of people I'd worked alongside for years. Some looked curious, others anxious. Patricia gave me an encouraging nod from the front row. Thank you all for coming, I began. Today marks a significant transition for Mitchell Fine Foods. After careful consideration and extensive negotiation, we have agreed to join the National Foods family as their specialty foods division. A murmur ran through the crowd. I continued, explaining the key points of the agreement: job security provisions, retention of the Mitchell brand, operational headquarters remaining local. I emphasized the opportunities that National's resources would bring for expansion and growth. Change can be unsettling, I acknowledged, but this decision positions us for a stronger future in an increasingly challenging market. The Mitchell legacy will continue and evolve. I introduced Caroline, who outlined National's vision with enthusiasm and addressed questions from employees. Throughout the session, I watched the reactions carefully. Some nodded with understanding, particularly those in finance and operations who had seen our market challenges firsthand. Others looked shell-shocked or betrayed. Notably absent were Marcus and my mother. Despite invitations, they had chosen not to attend, a decision that hurt but didn't surprise me. After the formal announcement, I spent the day meeting with department heads and key employees, ensuring they understood both the transition plan and their own positions within it. By late afternoon, exhaustion had set in, but there was one more conversation I needed to have. I found Eric McNally, our largest client, waiting in the reception area for his scheduled appointment. A second-generation restaurateur who had expanded his father's single location into a regional chain of upscale eateries. Eric had worked exclusively with Marcus for years. "Quite a day you've had," he observed as I led him to my office. "News travels fast in this industry. Thank you for coming in person," I said, offering him a seat. "I wanted you to hear from me directly about what this means for our relationship with McNally Restaurants." Eric studied me thoughtfully. "Marcus usually handles our account." "Yes, and he's done an excellent job. The relationship you've built is valuable to us and to National Foods. They've guaranteed continuity in your service and pricing structure." "But Marcus isn't staying, is he?" Eric's perception had always been sharp. "That's his decision to make. National would welcome his continued involvement, but ultimately it's up to him." Eric leaned back in his chair. "You know, your brother is charming, great at the social side of business. But over the years, I've noticed something interesting. Whenever we had actual problems to solve, supply chain issues or specialty import challenges, he'd always say, 'Let me talk to Vanessa.'" I blinked in surprise. "He used my name specifically?" "Every time. 'Vanessa will figure it out. Let me check with Vanessa.' You were his secret weapon." Eric smiled. "Not so secret to those of us paying attention." Something shifted inside me. A small but profound realignment of my understanding of my relationship with Marcus. He had relied on me more than he'd ever acknowledged. "National Foods has exceptional logistical capabilities," I said, returning to business. "Your account will receive priority attention during the transition and beyond." Eric nodded. "I trust your judgment, Vanessa. Always have." He extended his hand. "We'll continue with National Foods. Please ensure my team is introduced to our new account representatives properly." "Of course. Thank you for your confidence." After Eric left, I sat alone in my office as evening shadows lengthened. Tomorrow, National's transition team would begin the formal integration process. My official role would end in 2 weeks, though I'd agreed to consult through the first quarter as needed. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "We need to talk. Alone." We met at a small Italian restaurant downtown, neutral territory away from family homes and the office. Marcus arrived looking uncharacteristically disheveled, his usual polished appearance giving way to a day's growth of stubble and slightly rumpled clothes. "I spoke with National's VP of Client Relations today," he said after ordering a scotch. "They've offered me a position heading the specialty client division." "That's good news," I replied carefully. "It's a perfect fit for your skills." He studied his drink. "Mom thinks I'm betraying Dad by even considering it." "And what do you think?" "I think." He paused, choosing his words with unusual care. "I think Dad built something amazing that gave us tremendous opportunities. And I think he trusted you to know when the landscape had changed." I blinked in surprise. This was not the reaction I had expected. "The company was never going to be the same without him anyway," Marcus continued. You just had the courage to acknowledge it first. So you're taking the position? He nodded, with some conditions. I want autonomy over my client relationships and involvement in strategy for the specialty division. Those sound like reasonable requests. Caroline thinks highly of your client development skills. Marcus took a sip of his scotch. I've been angry since the will reading, not just because Dad left you controlling interest, but because it forced me to recognize that I'd been coasting on his reputation and your solutions for years. The admission hung between us, more valuable than any apology. You have genuine talent, Marcus. Your relationship-building skills are exceptional. You just need to couple them with deeper business understanding, which I can develop at National without the pressure of being the boss's son anymore. He managed a small smile. Or the boss's brother, as it would have been. We talked for 2 hours, the longest honest conversation we'd had in years. Marcus revealed aspirations and insecurities I hadn't known he harbored. I shared my own doubts about the sale and my uncertain future plans. We didn't resolve everything, but something fundamental shifted between us. As we prepared to leave, Marcus hesitated. Mom's struggling with this. She built her identity around being Mrs. Mitchell of Mitchell Fine Foods. Now she doesn't know who she is. I understand that feeling, I admitted. Give her time, she'll come around. Will she? Marcus shrugged. Eventually, she respects strength and decisiveness, even when she doesn't like the decisions. Deep down, she knows you're more like Dad than either of us realized. Walking to my car afterward, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. The hardest conversation had yielded unexpected understanding. Marcus and I would never be completely aligned. Our personalities and priorities were too different, but we had found a new respect for each other. The next morning, I deposited the cashier's check and scheduled meetings with financial advisors to discuss investment strategies. Caroline and her team were efficiently managing the transition at the office, needing minimal input from me. For the first time in my adult life, my day wasn't structured around Mitchell Fine Foods. I spent the morning at my favorite coffee shop, watching people rush past on their way to work. My phone buzzed occasionally with questions from Patricia, or updates from Caroline, but the urgent demands that had defined my existence for years were noticeably absent. By afternoon, restlessness set in. I drove to the park where my father and I used to walk when discussing difficult business decisions. The autumn air was crisp, leaves crunching beneath my feet as I followed our usual path. I wish you'd told me what you were planning, I said aloud, imagining my father walking beside me. But I think I understand why you didn't. If he had discussed his succession plans with me, I would have protested, insisted he treat Marcus with more equality. I would have tried to be fair rather than strategic. By presenting me with a decision already made, he had forced me to embrace my authority and make choices based on business judgment rather than family harmony. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was my mother, Vanessa. Her voice sounded tired. Are you busy? Not at all. Is everything okay? I think we should talk. Would you come to the house this evening? I found her in the garden, pruning roses with methodical precision. The house where I'd grown up looked exactly as it always had, my father's absence somehow both glaring and impossible in such familiar surroundings. Marcus tells me he's accepted a position with National, she said without preamble. Yes, it's a good opportunity for him. She snipped a dead branch with more force than necessary. He says you encouraged it. I told him it was his decision to make. My mother set down her gardening shears and faced me directly. I'm trying to understand, Vanessa. Help me understand why you would sell your father's life's work without even discussing it with us first. It was the most honest question she'd asked since the sale announcement. I considered my answer carefully. Because the discussion would have become about feelings rather than facts, about what we wished were true rather than what is true. Dad left me in charge because he knew I could separate the two. And what is true, according to you? That regional specialty distributors face increasing pressure from both larger competitors and direct-to-consumer startups. That our growth had plateaued despite our best efforts. That the Mitchell name and legacy would be better preserved as part of a larger organization than struggling to remain independent until financial realities forced a distressed sale. My mother absorbed this, her expression unreadable. Your father never spoke to me about these concerns. He protected you from business worries. Always did. He shouldn't have, she said with unexpected sharpness. I was his partner for 40 years. I deserve to know. Her response surprised me. It had never occurred to me that my mother might resent being sheltered from business realities. You're right, I said. You deserve to know. Just as Marcus and I deserve to be evaluated on our actual abilities rather than preconceived family roles. She flinched slightly but didn't disagree. Jessica tells me you negotiated exceptional terms, she said after a moment. The employee protections, the brand preservation. She says most acquirers wouldn't agree to such conditions. I wanted to honor Dad's priorities. My mother nodded slowly. You have more of him in you than I've wanted to admit. His practicality, his clear-headedness. She reached for her gardening shears again. I'm not ready to say you made the right decision, but I'm beginning to see why he trusted you to make it. It wasn't forgiveness or approval, but it was acknowledgement. The first step toward a new understanding between us. As I drove away from my childhood home that evening, I realized the most difficult chapter of this transition was closing. The company had been sold. The key conversations had been held. The path forward was clearing. Now I faced the most challenging question of all. With the weight of family expectation and business obligation lifted, who did I want to become? 3 weeks after the sale announcement, I found myself sitting in a sunlit cafe in Barcelona, sipping espresso and watching tourists stroll along La Rambla. The transition at Mitchell Fine Foods, now Mitchell Specialty Division of National Foods, had proceeded more smoothly than anticipated. Caroline Vega's team was competent and respectful of existing processes. Marcus had started his new role, displaying unexpected enthusiasm for the broader opportunities at National. My mother remained distant, but had stopped making pointed comments about betrayal and legacy. With the business aspects resolved and family tensions at least temporarily settled, I had fulfilled my promise to myself. Take time away. No responsibilities, no expectations, no 5-year plans, just exploration and reflection. Barcelona was my second stop after a week in London. I'd chosen destinations without family connections or business associations, places where I could be anonymous, just another American tourist with a guidebook and comfortable walking shoes. The freedom was both exhilarating and disorienting. More coffee, señora? The waiter asked, interrupting my people-watching. No, gracias. La cuenta, por favor. As I waited for the check, my phone buzzed with an email notification. Despite my promise to disconnect, I couldn't help checking it. Some habits die hard. It was from Peter Harrington, an old classmate from business school who now ran a venture capital firm specializing in food industry startups. Vanessa, heard about the National Foods acquisition. Impressive deal. I'm in Barcelona for a food innovation conference this week. Dinner if you're free? Would love to catch up. Peter. I hesitated before responding. Part of me wanted to maintain my self-imposed isolation, but another part recognized that Peter's perspective might be valuable. He had always been insightful about industry trends. I'm here too. Dinner sounds great. Suggestions? We met that evening at a small restaurant in the Gothic Quarter, away from the main tourist areas. Peter looked much as he had in business school. Tall and lean with prematurely silver hair, dressed in the Silicon Valley uniform of expensive casual clothes that deliberately avoided appearing too formal. The Mitchell exit made quite a splash in the industry, he said after we'd ordered. National needed a specialty foods division to compete with United Distributors, but nobody expected them to land Mitchell. Most assumed your father's death would strengthen family control, not loosen it. Most people misunderstood the dynamics, I replied, sipping my wine. Dad was more pragmatic than sentimental about business. Unlike your brother, from what I've heard? I raised an eyebrow. You've been following our family drama from California? Peter laughed. The specialty foods world is smaller than you'd think, and I make it my business to know the players. Speaking of which, he leaned forward slightly. What's next? For you? Taking the traditional post-exit sabbatical before diving into something new? Honestly, I don't know. It felt strange to admit this aloud, especially to someone from my professionally ambitious past. For the first time in my adult life, I don't have a 5-year plan. Best place to be, Peter nodded approvingly. Creative destruction. You have to clear space for new ideas to emerge. Our conversation flowed easily through dinner, covering industry gossip, mutual acquaintances, and his latest investments. Peter had always been good company, intellectually curious without being pretentious, ambitious without being cutthroat. The reason I'm in Barcelona, he said as we finished our meal, is a conference on sustainable food systems. One of my portfolio companies is presenting their biodegradable packaging technology. You should come tomorrow. I don't have credentials or an invitation. You'd be my guest. No pressure, no expectations. Just thought you might find it interesting, given your background. I hesitated, weighing the invitation against my plan for a leisurely day visiting Gaudi's architecture. The keynote is by Elena Vidal, Peter added, the woman revolutionizing small-scale distribution in developing markets. Right up your alley. My curiosity won out. What time does it start? The conference was held in a modern convention center, near the port. Despite Peter's assurances that the event was small and informal, it buzzed with energy. Entrepreneurs pitching ideas to potential investors, researchers sharing innovations, established companies scouting for acquisition targets. Elena Vidal's keynote was even more compelling than Peter had suggested. A former logistics executive who had developed a platform connecting small-scale food producers in rural communities with urban markets, she spoke passionately about democratizing distribution. The problem isn't production, she emphasized, her Spanish accent adding rhythm to her English. Farmers and producers can create exceptional products. The challenge is efficient, affordable distribution that preserves quality while ensuring fair compensation. Technology can bridge that gap. Her presentation outlined a system combining physical distribution hubs with digital platforms that eliminated traditional middlemen. The results were impressive. Higher margins for producers, lower prices for consumers, and reduced food waste throughout the system. During the Q&A session, I found myself raising my hand almost automatically. When the moderator called on me, I asked about scaling challenges in mature markets with entrenched competitors. Elena's eyes lit up at the question. The principles remain the same, but the strategies must adapt, she replied. In established markets, we focus on specialty segments underserved by large distributors, artisanal producers, ethnic specialties, emerging food trends. These create entry points that can expand over time. After the session, Peter introduced, Elena, this is Vanessa Mitchell, former CEO of Mitchell Fine Foods. The Mitchell that National Foods acquired? She shook my hand with genuine interest. Your specialty cheese program was a case study in our market expansion research. Brilliant curating. I blinked in surprise. You studied our cheese program? Of course. You created relationships with small European producers who had never exported to America before. That's exactly the connection building we're trying to facilitate, just at a different scale and in different markets. We spoke for 20 minutes before Elena was pulled away by conference organizers. Peter watched our conversation with evident satisfaction. She's impressive, I commented as we walked toward the exhibition area. One of the sharpest minds in the industry, Peter agreed. Her company, Connect Food, is growing exponentially in South America and starting to expand into Southeast Asia. Are you an investor? Not yet. They've been self-funding through grants and strategic partnerships, but they're opening their first proper funding round next quarter. He gave me a sidelong glance. Actually, they need more than just capital. They need expertise in developed markets as they expand. Someone who understands specialty food distribution intimately. I stopped walking. Peter, are you trying to recruit me? He raised his hands in mock innocence. Just making introductions between interesting people. What happens after that is entirely up to you. The rest of the conference day passed in a blur of presentations, demonstrations, and conversations. I found myself engaged in a way I hadn't expected, asking questions, exchanging contact information, discussing industry challenges with fellow attendees. It felt similar to my role at Mitchell, but somehow lighter, without the weight of family, expectations, and history. That evening, I joined Peter and several conference speakers for dinner at a seaside restaurant. Elena Vidal sat across from me, and our conversation picked up where we'd left off. Distribution is ultimately about connection, she said as we shared plates of grilled seafood. Connecting producers who have something valuable with people who will value it. The logistics, transportation, warehousing, inventory management, those are just mechanisms to facilitate the connection. But those mechanisms determine whether the connection is viable, I countered. The most beautifully produced cheese in the world is worthless if it spoils before reaching its destination. She nodded enthusiastically. Exactly. This is why we need people who understand both the art and science of distribution, the passion for the products, and the precision of the processes. As the night progressed, our conversation shifted from business to personal motivations. Elena described growing up in a small town outside Valencia, where her grandmother sold oranges at prices barely covering production costs, while supermarkets marked them up tenfold. That disparity between what producers receive and what distributors and retailers take has always bothered me, she explained. Not because profit is wrong, but because the value added doesn't justify the margin captured. What about you? She asked. What drew you to specialty foods? I considered the question, realizing I'd never really articulated my own motivations beyond following my father's footsteps. I love the stories behind specialty products, I finally said. Each one represents someone's heritage, craft, and passion. At Mitchell, I enjoyed creating systems that brought those stories and products to people who would appreciate them. Yet you sold the company. It wasn't a challenge, merely an observation. The industry is consolidating. Regional distributors, like Mitchell, are being squeezed from both ends. Large nationals taking major accounts, direct-to-consumer startups capturing specialty niches. We had to choose between a managed exit at optimal terms or a slow decline. Elena studied me, thoughtfully. And now? What story are you writing for yourself? The question caught me off guard. I'm still figuring that out. Well, she said with a warm smile. When you do, I hope it involves distribution innovation. We need more people who understand both the art and the science. Back in my hotel room that night, I found myself unable to sleep. My mind kept returning to conversations from the conference, particularly with Elena. For the first time since the sale, I felt a stirring of genuine excitement about future possibilities. I opened my laptop and began researching Connect Food more thoroughly, their technology platform, market penetration, business model. The more I read, the more impressed I became. They had created something genuinely innovative that addressed real problems for small producers. On impulse, I opened a new document and began outlining ideas for how their approach might be adapted for specialty producers in North America. The European artisans I'd worked with at Mitchell faced many of the same challenges as the South American farmers in Connect Food's network: limited market access, logistical hurdles, margin pressure from traditional distributors. I worked until dawn, filling pages with analysis and concepts. When I finally closed my laptop, I realized I'd done something I hadn't expected, created the beginnings of a new professional vision. The following morning, I messaged Peter. "Is Elena still in Barcelona? I'd like to continue our conversation." We met for lunch at a quiet restaurant near my hotel. I brought my laptop with the document I'd created overnight. I've been thinking about Connect Food's model and how it might translate to mature markets. I began after preliminary pleasantries. Elena's eyes lit with interest. "Tell me more." I opened my laptop and walked her through my analysis, the parallels between her South American producers and the European specialty manufacturers I knew, the distribution challenges common to both, and potential adaptations to Connect Food's platform to serve these markets. The key difference, I explained, is that in mature markets, we'd need to emphasize curation and storytelling alongside efficiency. Consumers looking for specialty products want more than convenience. They want authenticity, provenance, and connection to the producers. Elena listened intently, occasionally asking clarifying questions or offering insights from her experience. When I finished my presentation, she sat back and regarded me thoughtfully. "This is exactly the perspective we need," she said finally. "We've been debating North American expansion for months, but no one on our team has your specialized knowledge of the market." "It's just a rough concept," I cautioned. "It would need significant refinement." "Of course," she smiled. "Would you be interested in refining it with us? As a consultant initially, perhaps evolving into something more permanent if the fit is right." The offer was unexpected despite Peter's hints the previous day. "I'm still taking time to explore options," I said carefully. "I'm not ready to commit to anything permanent yet." "I understand completely. What if we start with a 3-month consulting arrangement? You'd work remotely, with perhaps a few weeks at our headquarters in Madrid. No long-term commitment required." It was a reasonable proposition, a chance to explore these ideas further without closing off other possibilities. And yet, I hesitated. "May I ask what's holding you back?" Elena inquired gently. I considered the question. For 20 years, I've worked within the parameters of my family's business. Even my innovations were constrained by existing structures and expectations. I'm not sure I'm ready to jump into another organization's framework so quickly. Elena nodded. That makes perfect sense. So what would work for you? Her willingness to adapt surprised me. Most executives in her position would simply move on to other candidates. What if we structured it as a joint research project? I suggested. I'd explore North American market adaptation independently, sharing findings and recommendations with your team. You'd gain valuable market intelligence without obligation, and I'd maintain my autonomy while testing these concepts. Interesting. Elena considered the proposal. We could provide access to our data and technology platform for research purposes. You'd retain ownership of your original work, while we'd have rights to implement recommendations we find valuable. Fair compensation, of course. That could work, I agreed, surprised by how natural this negotiation felt, despite my extended absence from business discussions. By the time we finished lunch, we had outlined terms for a 6-month research engagement. Elena would send a formal proposal within the week, and I would divide my time between independent research and collaboration with Connect Food's innovation team. As we parted, Elena shook my hand warmly. I have a feeling this is the beginning of something important, Vanessa. Walking back to my hotel, I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced in years. This opportunity was entirely my own, not inherited, not assigned, but chosen based on genuine interest and alignment with my values. That evening, I called Marcus. Despite our complicated history, He remained the person who best understood the industry context of my potential new venture. A research partnership with Connect Food? He repeated after I explained the opportunity. That's, actually perfect for you. You always were happiest when analyzing distribution challenges and finding creative solutions. You don't think it's too soon after the sale? I asked, surprised by his positive reaction. Too soon for what? To be intellectually engaged with something you find meaningful? That's never too soon. He paused. Besides, this doesn't sound like a traditional corporate role. It's more exploratory. Exactly. I'm not ready to commit to another organization's agenda yet. Makes sense. Marcus was silent for a moment. You know, it's interesting. Since joining National, I've discovered something similar. Having clear boundaries around my role actually feels more freeing than our old family dynamics. How so? At Mitchell, everything was personal. Every decision carried the weight of family history and future expectations. At National, I'm valued for specific skills within defined parameters. It's clarifying. His insight resonated with my own experience. The weight of the Mitchell legacy had constrained us both, albeit in different ways. How's Mom? I asked, changing the subject. Marcus sighed. Processing. She's redecorating the house. Says it's time for a fresh start. I think it's her way of acknowledging things have changed permanently. Has she mentioned me? Not directly, but she did ask about that specialty cheese shop you discovered in Providence. Wanted to know if it was still operating under National. I smiled at this small indication that my mother was, in her own way, recognizing my contributions. Tell her it is. Caroline made it a priority to maintain those specialty relationships. After ending the call with Marcus, I stepped onto my hotel balcony, looking out over Barcelona's illuminated skyline. The conversation had reinforced my inclination to accept Elena's proposal. It offered intellectual engagement without institutional constraints, the perfect transitional opportunity. The next morning, I extended my European stay, booking a flight to Madrid for the following week to visit Connect Food's headquarters. I also scheduled stops in London and Paris to reconnect with specialty producers I'd worked with at Mitchell, curious about their experiences in the changing distribution landscape. The research partnership with Connect Food began informally before contracts were even signed. Elena introduced me to their development team via video conference, and we established a collaborative workspace for sharing data and insights. I found myself energized by the discussions, contributing perspectives that complemented their technical expertise. 1 week turned into 3 as I traveled through Europe, dividing my time between Connect Food meetings and visits to specialty producers. In rural France, I toured a small cheese producer whose products I'd introduced to American markets 5 years earlier. The owner, Monsieur Beaumont, greeted me like family. Mitchell is no more? He asked as we walked through his aging rooms, where hundreds of cheese wheels were developing their distinctive rinds. The name continues, but under new ownership, I explained. National Foods purchased the company but maintains the Mitchell Specialty Division. He nodded thoughtfully. And they continue to purchase our cheese? Yes, those relationships remain intact. In fact, they're expanding distribution nationwide. Good. He paused before a particularly magnificent wheel of aged Comté. And you, Mademoiselle Mitchell? What becomes of you without your company? The question was asked with genuine concern. Over the years, Monsieur Beaumont and I had developed a relationship based on mutual respect and appreciation for exceptional food. I'm exploring new approaches to specialty food distribution, I told him. Ways to connect small producers like yourself with consumers who value your craftsmanship, potentially with fewer intermediaries and better margins. His eyes lit with interest. This has been the challenge for generations. The quality commands a premium price, but too little reaches the maker. Exactly. Technology offers new possibilities for shortening the chain between producer and consumer without sacrificing proper handling and storytelling. We discussed the concept further. Over lunch, a simple but extraordinary meal of his cheese, local bread, and regional wine, Monsieur Beaumont offered insights I hadn't considered about producers' priorities and concerns. The greatest fear, he explained, is not merely reduced margins, it is loss of identity, becoming merely an ingredient rather than a creation, with heritage and personality. His perspective crystallized something I'd been struggling to articulate in my research, that technology-enabled distribution wasn't merely about efficiency and cost, but about preserving and amplifying the stories behind specialty products. I incorporated this insight into my evolving framework, which I refined through similar conversations with producers throughout France, Italy, and Spain. Each visit added texture and nuance to the research, transforming abstract concepts into practical approaches grounded in producers' realities. By the time I returned to Madrid for a week at Connect Foods headquarters, I had developed a comprehensive adaptation of their model for specialty producers in mature markets. The Connect Food team responded enthusiastically to my presentation, particularly the emphasis on storytelling and provenance alongside logistical efficiency. This addresses precisely the concerns our expansion committee has raised about North American markets, Elena said during our strategy session. The infrastructure exists, but the relationships and narratives require specialized knowledge. We spent hours refining the concept, identifying pilot regions and producer categories for initial testing. The collaboration felt natural and energizing. Ideas flowing freely without the weight of family dynamics or historical constraints I'd experienced at Mitchell. On my final evening in Madrid, Elena invited me to dinner at her home, a modern apartment filled with art from Latin American and Spanish artists. As we enjoyed a meal prepared by her partner, Miguel, our conversation shifted from business to more personal reflections. When we first met, Elena said, refilling our wine glasses, you mentioned you were still figuring out your story. Has that changed? I considered the question. I'm beginning to see outlines, at least. Something that combines my distribution expertise with greater autonomy and purpose. And does this outline include continuing our work together beyond the research phase? Potentially. I smiled. I'm enjoying the collaboration more than I expected. Good. Elena set down her glass. Because I have a proposition that might interest you. Our board has approved North American expansion, with a dedicated subsidiary focused on specialty segments. We need someone to lead it, someone who understands both the technical aspects and the cultural nuances. I raised an eyebrow. Are you offering me a job? Not exactly. Her expression was thoughtful. More like a partnership. We'd provide the technology platform and initial funding. You'd structure the North American operation with considerable autonomy. Equity participation, of course. The proposition was unexpected, yet somehow perfectly aligned with the direction my thinking had been evolving. Not employment within someone else's structure, but the creation of something new with technical support and resources already in place. I'd want significant control over strategy and implementation, I said, testing the boundaries. Of course, you know these markets in ways we don't. Our expertise is in the platform and methodology. Your expertise is in the specific application. I'd need time to consider it properly. Elena nodded. Take all the time you need. The foundation we're building through the research partnership isn't wasted either way. Flying home to Boston the following week, I reflected on how dramatically my perspective had shifted since selling Mitchell Fine Foods. What had begun as an escape, both from family expectations and professional identity, had evolved into exploration and now potential creation. The Connect Food partnership offered a compelling balance, applying my specialized knowledge while building something new, supported by established technology but with significant autonomy. It wasn't merely a job or even a traditional executive role. It was an opportunity to shape distribution systems according to values I'd always held, but never fully implemented within Mitchell's constraints. After landing, I drove directly to my mother's house, our childhood home that had always been the center of family gatherings and business discussions. We hadn't spoken directly since my departure for Europe, communicating only through brief text messages and updates via Marcus. She opened the door wearing painting clothes, her hair tied back in a casual ponytail I'd rarely seen during my childhood when she maintained a polished appearance as Mrs. Mitchell of Mitchell Fine Foods. Vanessa. She seemed genuinely surprised despite my text announcing my visit. "You're back." "Just landed," I confirmed. "Thought I'd stop by on my way home." She ushered me inside. The living room was transformed, walls now a warm terracotta. Instead of the formal beige they'd been my entire life, new artwork replacing the traditional landscapes my father had preferred. "You've been busy," I observed, taking in the changes. "Time for something different." She gestured toward the kitchen. "Coffee?" We sat at the kitchen table where countless family decisions had been debated over the years. The room remained, largely unchanged, still featuring the commercial-grade appliances my father had installed when his passion for food expanded beyond the company to home cooking. "Marcus tells me you're working with some Spanish distribution company," my mother said as she poured coffee into mugs that had survived the redecoration purge. "A research partnership exploring new models for specialty food distribution," I clarified. "They've developed innovative approaches in developing markets that might be adapted for artisanal producers here." She nodded, absorbing this information. "And this is what you want to do? Start over with something new?" The question seemed genuine rather than judgmental, a shift from our previous interactions where every career discussion carried implicit comparisons to family expectations. "I'm considering it," I replied cautiously. "They've proposed a more permanent arrangement, establishing a North American operation that I would lead." "A job offer?" "More of a partnership, significant autonomy and equity participation." My mother was quiet for a moment, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. "Your father always said you had vision, that you could see possibilities others missed." The comment surprised me. "He told you that?" "Many times." She met my eyes, directly. "He admired your strategic thinking more than you realized. That's why he left you in charge, despite knowing how difficult it would make things between us." This acknowledgement, the first real recognition from my mother that my father's decision had been based on capability rather than emotion, felt like the closing of a chapter. "I've had time to think while you were away," she continued. "About the company, about family roles, about change." She gestured around the freshly painted kitchen. "Not everything needs to remain exactly as it was to honor its value." It was as close to approval as I was likely to receive. Not an admission that selling had been right, but acceptance that change was sometimes necessary. The Mitchell name continues, I reminded her gently. The relationships Dad built, the quality standards he established, those remain intact at National. "Yes." She nodded. "Marcus seems happy with his role there. More settled than I've seen him in years, actually. He mentioned something similar, that having clearer boundaries has been freeing." My mother looked thoughtful. "Perhaps we all needed that. Boundaries. Space to become ourselves outside the family identity." As I drove from my mother's house to my downtown apartment, I felt a sense of resolution settling over me. The sale of Mitchell Fine Foods had been necessary not just for business reasons, but for personal ones, creating space for all of us to redefine ourselves beyond established family patterns. The next morning, I called Elena. "I'd like to discuss your proposal in more detail," I said when she answered, "particularly the structure of the North American operation and the parameters of my autonomy." Wonderful, she replied, her enthusiasm evident even across the Atlantic. I've already drafted some preliminary frameworks based on our discussions. I'll send them over, and we can schedule a proper call with the legal team. After hanging up, I walked to my office window overlooking Boston Harbor. Ships moved steadily in and out of the port, a constant flow of goods connecting producers and consumers across continents. The sight had always fascinated me, even as a child visiting my father's office. Distribution wasn't merely logistics, it was connection, creating pathways for valuable things to reach people who valued them. I had done that at Mitchell Fine Foods within the constraints of family legacy and traditional structures. Now, I had the opportunity to reimagine those pathways, to build connections that better served both creators and consumers. For the first time since my father's death, I felt a genuine sense of purpose and direction. Not continuing someone else's legacy, but creating my own. Not fulfilling family expectations, but pursuing vision aligned with personal values. The journey that had begun with my mother's declaration, "Your brother deserves the company more," had led me somewhere unexpected, not to resentment or capitulation, but to liberation. The company was gone, but possibility remained, richer, more authentic, and unbound by the weight of family history. I opened my laptop and began drafting notes for my conversation with Elena. Questions, clarifications, proposed modifications to her framework. This time, I wasn't adapting myself to fit an existing structure. I was helping shape a structure that reflected my vision from the beginning. 3 months later, Connect Food. North America launched with headquarters in Boston and satellite operations in California and Quebec. As founding president with significant equity stake, I led a team combining technology expertise from Madrid with specialty food knowledge recruited from my industry connections. Our first initiative, a platform connecting artisanal cheese, producers with independent retailers and restaurants, reflected lessons learned from both Mitchell Fine Foods and Connect Foods' international operations. We emphasized not just efficient distribution, but authentic storytelling and fair compensation throughout the supply chain. At our launch event, I spotted my mother quietly entering the back of the room. She hadn't RSVP'd to the invitation I'd sent more out of courtesy than expectation of attendance. After my presentation, she approached cautiously. "Congratulations," she said, her expression a mixture of pride and lingering adjustment to our new reality. "Your father would have been fascinated by this approach." "Thank you for coming," I replied, genuinely touched by her presence. She glanced around at the innovative space we'd created, part office, part demonstration kitchen, part technology hub. "It suits you," she observed, leading something new, something with purpose. In that moment, I realized we had both found our way forward, not by clinging to what had been, but by embracing what could be. The legacy that mattered wasn't contained in a company name or family tradition, but in the values and vision we brought to whatever we created next. "Will you stay for the reception?" I asked. "There are some producers here you might remember from Dad's original portfolio. They've joined our pilot program." My mother nodded, her smile small but genuine. "I'd like that. I'd like to hear their stories." As we walked together toward the gathering, I felt the circle complete itself. What had begun as an ending had transformed into a beginning. Not just for me, but for everyone touched by the difficult decisions that had led us here. Sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't what we receive, but what we choose to build once we're free to choose our own path. 1 year after launching Connect Food, North America, I stood on the loading dock of our newest distribution hub in Portland, Oregon. The early morning sun illuminated workers carefully unloading artisanal cheeses, small batch preserves, and specialty grains from climate-controlled vehicles. Our proprietary tracking system, a sophisticated adaptation of Connect Foods' original platform, monitored temperature, humidity, and handling throughout the journey from producer to consumer, Impressive operation, remarked Diane Foster, a venture capitalist considering investment in our expansion plans, particularly the integration of traditional food handling with digital tracking. The core insight was recognizing that technology should enhance craftsmanship, not replace it, I explained, leading her through the facility. These products require both human expertise and precise logistics. We passed through temperature-controlled zones where staff in white coats carefully evaluated and processed incoming shipments. Each product carried a digital signature linking it to its producer, complete with story, production methods, and handling requirements. Our platform connects three key components, I continued as we entered the technical heart of the operation. First, the physical infrastructure, these specialized facilities and custom transport. Second, the digital marketplace where retailers and restaurants source products. Third, and most importantly, the storytelling component that communicates provenance and value. On large monitors around the room, employees tracked shipments, managed inventory, and maintained communication with both producers and buyers. The system displayed real-time data on everything from transit conditions to customer feedback. The producers remain the focus, I emphasized. We're not merely moving products, we're extending their reach while preserving their identity and ensuring fair compensation. Diane nodded appreciatively, and the growth metrics are remarkable. 30% increase in participating producers in just 1 year. 65% revenue growth. What's driving the adoption rate? Word of mouth among producer communities. When artisans see colleagues receiving better margins while maintaining control of their story and reputation, they're eager to join. And on the buyer side, access to carefully curated specialty products with transparent sourcing creates tremendous value. We completed our tour in my office, a space deliberately designed to balance technical efficiency with artisanal appreciation. One wall featured digital displays tracking operations across our 3 distribution hubs. The opposite wall showcased handcrafted items from our producer partners, ceramic vessels, hand-woven baskets, carved wooden implements. You've created something truly distinctive, Diane observed, accepting the locally roasted coffee my assistant offered. A genuine hybrid of traditional values and modern efficiency. The hybrid approach reflects our core philosophy, I agreed. Technology serving craftsmanship rather than displacing it. As Diane reviewed the investment materials, I gazed through my office window at the distribution floor below. The scene represented everything I'd hoped to achieve, a system that honored specialty producers while creating viable pathways to appreciative consumers. Connect Food North America had evolved rapidly from concept to operational reality. What began as a research partnership had transformed into a thriving enterprise with hubs in Boston, Portland, and Quebec City, servicing specialty food producers across the continent. Our platform now connected over 300 artisanal producers, with thousands of commercial and retail buyers. The transition from Mitchell Fine Foods executive to startup founder had been both challenging and liberating. Instead of maintaining established systems, I was building something new, a distribution model that aligned with my values while addressing real market needs. My phone buzzed with a text from Elena Vidal. Landing in PDX at 3. Dinner tonight to celebrate the numbers? I smiled and replied affirmatively. Elena had become both mentor and friend, providing guidance while respecting my autonomy. Our partnership balanced her technological vision with my specialty market expertise, creating something neither could have achieved alone. After Diane departed with promises of follow-up conversations, I spent the afternoon meeting with our operations team to address expansion challenges. The rapid growth created both opportunities and complications, maintaining quality standards at scale, preserving the personalized approach that distinguished us from conventional distributors, managing the logistics of increasingly diverse product categories. We need additional quality control specialists, urged Mei Lin, our operations director, particularly for the new cheese producers joining from Vermont and New York. Agreed, I replied, reviewing the staffing projections. Let's prioritize hiring people with direct experience in those specific production methods. Former cheesemakers who understand the craft from first-hand experience. That'll increase our labor costs relative to industry standards, noted Robert, our CFO. And deliver value that justifies the investment, I countered. Our entire model depends on expertise that conventional distributors don't provide. We're charging premium rates because we deliver premium service. The discussion continued, balancing practical considerations with foundational principles. This was the daily reality of building a values-based business, constantly aligning operational decisions with core philosophy while remaining financially viable. That evening, I met Elena at Terrain, a farm-to-table restaurant that sourced extensively through our platform. The chef greeted us warmly, highlighting menu items featuring products from our producer partners. The sales figures exceeded even our optimistic projections, Elena noted as we settled at our table. The board is thrilled with the North American performance. The timing was perfect, I acknowledged. Specialty producers were feeling squeezed by conventional distribution, and consumers were increasingly interested in transparency and authenticity. We bridged that gap. And your strategy of emphasizing storytelling alongside logistics proved brilliant. The European team is now implementing similar approaches based on your success. I smiled at this reversal, the parent company adopting innovations from the subsidiary. How are the Southeast Asian operations progressing? Steady growth, though with different challenges than North America. Less established cold chain infrastructure, more diverse regulatory environments. Elena sipped her wine thoughtfully. Which raises an interesting question. Would you consider advising on our Asian expansion? Your perspective could be valuable, particularly regarding premium product positioning. The request was flattering, but prompted immediate caution. I'm honored, but my focus needs to remain on solidifying our operations here. We're at a critical growth stage that requires full attention. Elena nodded, unsurprised. I expected that answer. Your commitment to building properly before expanding is precisely why the North American operation has succeeded so impressively. Our conversation shifted to personal matters. Elena's recent marriage to Miguel, my gradual reconciliation with my mother, shared observations about the changing specialty food landscape. We had developed a friendship that transcended our business partnership based on mutual respect and shared values. Have you spoken with Marcus recently? Elena inquired as we finished our meal. Last week. He's thriving at National Foods. Just received a promotion to Senior Vice President of Client Relations. And the Mitchell Specialty Division, still, operating as promised. I nodded. Largely, yes. Some inevitable corporate streamlining, but they've maintained the core product lines and supplier relationships. No regrets about selling? The question was asked casually but carried weight. I considered my response carefully. None about the business decision. Mitchell Fine Foods needed resources we couldn't provide independently, and National offered fair terms. As for the personal aspects, I paused, reflecting on the tumultuous transition period. The process was painful but ultimately necessary. It created space for everyone to find more authentic roles. Including you, Elena observed, especially me. Later that night, back in my hotel room, I reviewed the expansion proposals our team had prepared for the upcoming board meeting. The numbers were impressive. Revenue growth exceeding projections, producer partnerships increasing steadily, operational metrics showing improved efficiency alongside quality standards. More meaningful than the financial metrics were the stories emerging from our producer partners. Artisanal cheesemakers reporting increased capacity utilization without compromising craftsmanship. Small-scale grain farmers accessing premium markets previously beyond their reach. family-owned specialty businesses transitioning successfully to new generations because viable distribution channels ensured sustainable operations. These outcomes represented exactly what I'd hoped to create: a distribution system that strengthened, rather than exploited, the specialty producers it served. The technical innovations mattered only insofar as they supported this fundamental purpose. My phone rang unexpectedly, my mother calling despite the late hour on the East Coast. "Is everything all right?" I asked, immediately concerned by the unusual timing. "Everything's fine," she assured me. "I just returned from dinner with Marcus and wanted to share some news while I was thinking of it. The house has sold. The family home. She had mentioned considering downsizing but hadn't confirmed her plans when we last spoke." "That's significant," I said carefully. "How do you feel about it?" "Ready?" It was time. Her voice held certainty rather than regret. "The young couple buying it has 2 small children and a catering business they run from home. They'll appreciate the kitchen your father designed." "Where will you go?" "I've purchased a condominium downtown near the Symphony, more suitable for this stage of life." This practical approach to change represented significant growth from the woman who had once clung desperately to family traditions and expectations. "Will you need help with the move?" I offered. "Marcus has arranged movers, but perhaps you could help decide what to do with your father's things? His collections, his books on food history? They should go to someone who values them." The request signaled another step in our healing relationship: acknowledgement that despite our differences, I remained the person who best understood my father's passions. "Of course. I'll arrange to come when I'm back east next week." "Good." She paused briefly. "I saw an article about your company in Food Business Monthly. The journalist described your distribution model as revolutionary." "Trade publications tend toward hyperbole," I demurred. "Perhaps. But your father would have been fascinated. He always believed distribution was as important as production in determining food quality." This small recognition, connecting my current work to my father's values, meant more than she likely realized. "Thank you for saying that." After we ended the call, I returned to the expansion proposals with renewed perspective. The path from Mitchell Fine Foods to Connect Food North America hadn't been direct or easy, but it had led somewhere meaningful, professionally and personally. The following morning brought an unexpected visitor to the Portland facility. As I conducted my daily operations review, Patricia Coleman, my father's longtime colleague and my former ally at Mitchell, appeared in the doorway of my office. "Patricia!" I exclaimed, genuinely delighted. "What brings you to Portland?" "National Foods sent me to evaluate specialty producers in the Northwest," she explained, accepting my offered hug. "Thought I'd surprise you rather than calling ahead." "Wonderful surprise. Let me show you what we've built here." As we toured the facility, Patricia observed everything with professional attention to detail. Though officially retired from Mitchell shortly after the acquisition, she had accepted National's offer to consult on specialty procurement, preserving important institutional knowledge during the transition. "Impressive operation," she commented as we completed the tour. "Particularly the producer education program. That addresses a critical gap in the traditional distribution model." "It was inspired partly by conversations with Mitchell suppliers," I acknowledged. "Many had valuable products but limited understanding of market positioning and growth strategies." Over lunch in the facility's staff cafe, featuring products from our partner producers, Patricia shared updates about former colleagues and industry developments. National Foods had maintained most commitments from the acquisition agreement, though with inevitable corporate adjustments. Marcus had indeed found his niche in client relations, leveraging his natural charm within a more structured framework. "Your mother seems different lately," Patricia observed. "More open to new experiences. She joined the cultural exchange program I volunteer with, helping international culinary students practice English. Very unlike the Linda Mitchell I knew." for decades. She's finding her own identity beyond Mrs. Mitchell of Mitchell Fine Foods, I reflected, just as we all are. Patricia studied me thoughtfully. You certainly have. I always knew you had vision, but this… She gestured. Around the facility, this exceeds anything I imagined, creating an entirely new distribution model rather than merely improving the old one. The sale created that opportunity. Without it, I'd still be working within established constraints. Perhaps. Or perhaps you would have transformed Mitchell, eventually just more gradually. After Patricia departed, I found myself contemplating her observation. Had selling Mitchell been merely an accelerant for changes that would have occurred regardless? Or had that decisive break been necessary to create space for genuine innovation? The question remained with me throughout the afternoon as I conducted interviews for our expanding quality assurance team. Each candidate brought different expertise: former cheesemakers, specialty bakers, craft beverage producers who understood their respective categories from direct experience. What connected these diverse specialists was their appreciation for craft and their recognition that proper distribution determined whether artisanal products reached consumers with integrity intact. They had experienced the limitations of conventional systems and recognized the value of our alternative approach. By late afternoon, I had selected 3 promising candidates who embodied both technical knowledge and philosophical alignment with our mission. Building the right team had proven essential to our success, people who shared our values while contributing diverse perspectives and expertise. That evening, I joined Elena for dinner with potential investors at an upscale restaurant overlooking Portland's waterfront. As we discussed expansion plans and growth projections, I noticed how naturally I had adapted to the founder role, articulating vision, defending core principles, navigating the balance between mission and financial sustainability. The specialty food sector continues to outperform general food retail by significant margins, I explained to the investment group. Consumers increasingly value transparency, craftsmanship, and unique products with authentic stories. Our platform connects these consumers with producers who deliver these qualities but lack efficient distribution channels. What prevents larger distributors from simply copying your model? Asked one investor, a sharp-eyed woman with decades of food industry experience. Several factors, I replied confidently. First, our proprietary technology specifically designed for small batch handling and tracking. Second, our established relationships with hundreds of specialty producers who trust our approach. Third, and most importantly, our fundamental philosophy. We serve producers rather than merely moving products. That orientation informs every aspect of our operation in ways difficult to replicate within conventional distribution frameworks. The investors nodded appreciatively. They had toured our facility earlier and witnessed the practical application of these principles, the careful handling procedures, the emphasis on product story and provenance, the direct communication channels between producers and buyers. Your growth metrics are impressive, noted another investor, reviewing the documentation. Particularly producer retention rates. 97% is extraordinary in any business context. Because we deliver genuine value, I explained. Producers earn better margins while maintaining control of their story and reputation. That combination rarely exists in conventional distribution relationships. As the dinner progressed, I found myself drawing on experiences from Mitchell Fine Foods while articulating a fundamentally different vision. My years managing traditional distribution had provided valuable insights about limitations and opportunities, knowledge that informed Connect Foods' innovations without constraining them. Later that night, in the quiet of my hotel room, I reflected on the journey of the past 18 months. The sale of Mitchell Fine Foods, initially so painful and contentious, had created possibility I couldn't have anticipated. The family, conflict though traumatic, had ultimately freed each of us to pursue more authentic paths. My phone chimed with an email notification. Opening it revealed a message from one of our earliest producer partners. an artisanal cheesemaker from Vermont, whose business had been struggling before joining our platform. Vanessa, just wanted to share some good news. My daughter has decided to join the business after finishing her culinary training. She's developing new specialty varieties that we'll begin offering through Connect Food next season. When we met last year, I wasn't sure our farm would survive another generation. The economics simply didn't work with traditional distribution, taking such a large percentage while treating our products as commodities rather than craft. Your platform changed that equation. We now reach customers who truly value what we create, and the improved margins make the business sustainable for my daughter to carry forward. Thank you for building something that preserves craft businesses like ours. With gratitude, Thomas. The message represented exactly the impact I had hoped to create, helping specialty producers build sustainable businesses that could transition successfully between generations. What had begun as a professional exploration had evolved into something with genuine purpose and measurable impact. The following morning, after finalizing arrangements with our Portland team, I prepared for my flight back to Boston. Our East Coast operations required attention, particularly as we implemented lessons learned from the Portland expansion. The growth trajectory demanded careful management to maintain quality standards while increasing capacity. As I packed my suitcase, my phone rang with a call from an unfamiliar number with a New York area code. Vanessa Mitchell speaking. Ms. Mitchell, this is Andrew Pearson from the James Beard Foundation. Do you have a moment? The unexpected call from such a prestigious culinary organization caught me by surprise. Of course, Mr. Pearson. How can I help you? I'm calling because you've been nominated for our Outstanding Food Entrepreneur Award. The committee was particularly impressed by Connect Food's innovative approach to preserving artisanal food traditions through modern distribution solutions. I sat down on the edge of the hotel bed, genuinely stunned. That's unexpected and deeply appreciated. Thank you for letting me know. The nomination came from several prominent chefs and food producers who credit your platform with transforming their businesses. The award ceremony is in May in New York. We'll send formal details shortly. After ending the call, I remained seated, processing the significance of this recognition. The James Beard Foundation represented the highest standards in American culinary achievement. A nomination acknowledged not just business success, but meaningful contribution to food culture. More importantly, the nomination had come from producers and chefs, the very people Connect Food was designed to serve. Their appreciation validated our approach more meaningfully than any financial metric could. On the flight back to Boston, I reviewed notes from meetings with potential Portland producers who might join our platform. Each represented distinctive craftsmanship and heritage. Small-scale grain farmers reviving heritage varieties, artisanal vinegar makers using traditional fermentation methods, specialty honey producers with unique terroir-influenced products. What struck me was how many mentioned the same concern: conventional distribution channels that treated their products as interchangeable commodities rather than distinctive creations. The problem I had recognized at Mitchell Fine Foods remained widespread throughout the industry, creating both challenge and opportunity for Connect Food's expansion. Landing in Boston brought immediate immersion in East Coast operations. Our original facility, now serving as both distribution hub and company headquarters, had expanded to adjacent buildings, creating a campus-like environment where technology and traditional food handling expertise coexisted. The following morning, I met with our executive team to review quarterly performance and discuss strategic priorities. The growth trajectory created both excitement and caution. Expanding too rapidly might compromise the quality standards that distinguished us, while moving too slowly could create opportunities for competitors to enter the specialized niche we had developed. The Portland facility has exceeded performance projections, reported Mei Lin via video conference. Producer, onboarding is proceeding at 20% above target, with quality metrics maintaining expected standards. Customer acquisition costs have decreased 15%, added our marketing director. Word-of-mouth referrals now represent 60% of new accounts, reducing paid marketing requirements. The metrics were encouraging, but I remained focused on qualitative measures as well. How are we performing on producer satisfaction? Are we maintaining the personal connection despite growth? Latest survey shows 92% very satisfied, responded our producer relations manager. Key factors cited include transparent communication, fair pricing, and appreciation for craft. Areas for improvement include more educational, resources, and cross-promotional opportunities between producers. This balanced feedback reflected our commitment to continuous improvement while maintaining core values. Unlike conventional distributors focused solely on volume and margin, Connect Food measured success by both financial performance and producer satisfaction. After the executive meeting, I spent time on the distribution floor, observing operations and speaking directly with staff. This regular practice, maintaining personal connection with frontline operations, had been essential to our culture from the beginning. The new quality verification protocols are working well, reported Carmen, our senior quality specialist. We're catching potential issues before products leave producer facilities, reducing both waste and disappointment. And the producers appreciate the feedback, added Jeremy, another quality team member. They see it as partnership rather than criticism, helping them improve while maintaining their reputation. This collaborative approach distinguished Connect Food from traditional distribution relationships that often position distributors and producers as adversaries negotiating competing interests. Our model recognized that quality, fair compensation, and consumer satisfaction were aligned rather than conflicting goals. Late that afternoon, I received an unexpected visitor. Marcus arrived at the reception desk without appointment, looking both professional and relaxed in business casual attire rather than the formal suits he had favored at Mitchell. Thought I'd stop by while in town for Nationals regional meeting, he explained as we walked to my office. See what my sister has built that has the industry buzzing. I gave him the standard tour, explaining our integrated approach to physical distribution and digital marketplace. Marcus observed everything with genuine interest, occasionally noting parallels and differences to Mitchell's traditional model. The technology integration is impressive, he commented as we examined the tracking systems. But what really distinguishes this is the philosophy. You've centered the producers in a way conventional distribution never does. His observation, precisely identifying Connect Food's core innovation, surprised me. Marcus had developed greater analytical depth than I had recognized. National could never implement something like this, he continued thoughtfully. Too much institutional momentum behind conventional approaches. But they're watching closely, particularly how you're capturing premium segments they've struggled to serve effectively. In my office after the tour, Marcus accepted coffee and settled into a visitor chair with noticeable ease. Our relationship had evolved significantly since the contentious period surrounding Mitchell's sale. Not quite close, but respectful and occasionally warm. Mom mentioned you're helping sort Dad's collections before her move, he said, changing subjects. I appreciate that. You understand those things better than I do. They should be preserved properly, I replied. His knowledge of food history and traditions was remarkable. Marcus nodded agreement. You know, I've been thinking recently about how differently we experienced him. To me, he was always somewhat distant, approving when I made sales, disappointed when I didn't understand operations details. But with you, he shared his real passions, the food origins, the production methods, the principles behind quality. This acknowledgement of our different relationships with our father represented significant growth in Marcus's self-awareness. Rather than resenting the special connection I had shared with Dad, he now recognized it as simply different from his own. He connected with each of us differently, I offered. He appreciated your people skills and charm, qualities I've never possessed in the same measure. Marcus smiled wryly. True enough. but I've come to realize something important this past year. He was right about who should lead Mitchell. I would have preserved it exactly as it was, resisting necessary changes until crisis forced decisions. This admission, acknowledging the wisdom in our father's controversial succession choice, would have been unimaginable 18 months earlier. "And now?" I asked. "Are you satisfied with your path at National?" Surprisingly, yes. The role suits me. Building relationships, solving client problems, representing the company publicly, and without the pressure of ultimate decision-making. He leaned forward slightly. "What about you? This seems to be exactly where you belong." His observation echoed my own growing certainty. It is. Building something aligned with my values. While drawing on my experience, it's challenging but deeply satisfying. After Marcus departed, I remained in my office reviewing expansion projections. Our growth trajectory suggested potential for additional regional hubs, perhaps in Texas and the upper Midwest, to complete our national coverage. The question wasn't whether to expand, but how to maintain our distinctive approach at increasing scale. My assistant interrupted with a call from Jessica Winters, our former family attorney who had handled the Mitchell sale. "Congratulations on your James Beard nomination," she said when I answered. "Well-deserved recognition." "Thank you, Jessica. News travels fast." "In food circles, absolutely. Several of my clients mentioned it this morning." She paused briefly. "I'm actually calling about something different. Your father established a trust with specific provisions that activate on the second anniversary of his death. That date is approaching, and as trustee, I need to schedule a meeting with you and Marcus." This was unexpected news. "What kind of provisions?" "I'm not at liberty to discuss details until the formal meeting, but it relates to his personal collections and archives rather than business assets." The mysterious trust sparked immediate curiosity, but I respected Jessica's procedural correctness. We scheduled the meeting for the following week when both Marcus and I would be in Boston. The remainder of the week passed in strategic planning sessions, producer meetings, and preparation for an upcoming food industry conference where I would deliver a keynote address on reimagining specialty distribution. The James Beard nomination had increased interest in Connect Food's approach, creating opportunities to share our model with broader audiences. The weekend brought a different focus as I helped my mother sort through my father's collections at the family home. The process was both pragmatic and emotional, determining appropriate destinations for his extensive library of food history, books, his collection of artisanal cooking implements from around the world, his meticulously organized recipe archives. "These should stay together rather than being dispersed," my mother observed as we cataloged his annotated first editions of classic culinary texts. "Perhaps a culinary school or food research institute. The Schlesinger Library at Radcliffe has an excellent culinary collection," I suggested. "They might appreciate these as a named collection." We worked companionably through the weekend, finding appropriate homes for items that deserved preservation while setting aside personal keepsakes for family members. The process allowed conversations that would have been impossible during the tense period following the sale. Reflections on my father's passions, acknowledgement of his complexities, shared memories of family meals and food discoveries. "He would approve of what you've created," my mother said unexpectedly as we finished Sunday afternoon. Connect Food embodies his belief that distribution should enhance rather than diminish food quality. The observation, connecting my current work to my father's values, offered a sense of continuity I hadn't realized I needed. Despite the necessary break with family business tradition, some deeper connection remained intact. The following Wednesday, Marcus and I met Jessica at her downtown office. The formal setting suggested significance beyond routine legal matters. "Thank you both for coming," Jessica began, opening an impressive leather portfolio. "As you know, your father established various trusts and provisions in his estate planning. One specific trust becomes active tomorrow, the second anniversary, of his death. She removed a sealed envelope and a small key. Robert left specific instructions that this letter be read in the presence of both of you, followed by the opening of a secured storage unit containing items he preserved for this purpose. Marcus and I exchanged puzzled glances as Jessica carefully opened the envelope and began reading. To my children, Vanessa and Marcus, if you are hearing these words, 2 years have passed since my departure. Much has likely changed in that time. For the company, for our family, and for each of you individually. Throughout my life, I collected not just specialty foods, but the stories behind them, the traditions, innovations, and human connections that transform mere sustenance into cultural expression. These collections represent my personal passion, distinct from Mitchell Fine Foods as a business entity. I have established this trust to preserve these collections and ensure they continue to educate and inspire. The trust provides funding for proper maintenance, exhibition, and continuation of the historical documentation I began decades ago. My wish is for these collections to form the foundation of the Mitchell Food Heritage Center, an independent, educational institution dedicated to preserving artisanal food traditions and innovations. The trust provides initial funding for establishment and first-year operations, with an endowment generating ongoing support. I leave the execution of this vision to both of you, Vanessa with her deep appreciation for food heritage, and Marcus with his talent for public engagement. Together, you possess the complementary skills needed to transform my personal passion into a meaningful institution. This project requires no obligation to Mitchell Fine Foods as a business entity. It stands independent of commercial concerns, while preserving the cultural values that inspired the company's founding. The storage facility contains my complete archives, digital catalog system, and detailed vision for the center. The trust documentation provides specific guidelines while allowing flexibility for your implementation. With love and confidence in you both, Dad. Jessica finished reading and looked up to find us both visibly moved. The letter revealed a side of our father neither of us had fully appreciated. His awareness of potential changes after his death and his desire to preserve values beyond business continuity. The trust documentation is substantial, Jessica continued, indicating a thick folder. But the essence is straightforward. Funding to establish a food heritage center based on Robert's collections, with you two as founding trustees responsible for implementation. Marcus found his voice first. He planned this without telling either of us, even while changing his will and preparing for company succession. Your father was remarkably thorough in his planning, Jessica confirmed. He established this trust separately from both personal and business assets, with specific timing to allow for personal and professional transitions before introducing this new responsibility. The strategic wisdom was characteristic of my father, anticipating how our roles and relationships might evolve post-succession, creating space for necessary changes before introducing a potential collaboration. When can we see the storage facility? I asked, professional curiosity, overtaking emotional response. Immediately if you wish. I've arranged for access this afternoon. The storage facility proved to be a climate-controlled space filled with meticulously organized artifacts. Rare cookbooks, historical kitchen implements, documented food traditions from diverse cultures, recorded interviews with artisanal producers, comprehensive notes on specialty production methods. More than physical objects, the collection represented a coherent perspective on food as cultural heritage, the importance of preserving traditional knowledge while embracing thoughtful innovation. My father had documented disappearing techniques, recorded oral histories from aging practitioners, created a digital catalog system linking artifacts to their cultural contexts. This is extraordinary, Marcus murmured as we surveyed the extensive archives. I had no idea Dad was documenting all this beyond his personal interest. He was creating something significant, I agreed, examining the careful organization system. Not just collecting objects, but preserving knowledge and context. As we explored further, we discovered detailed architectural renderings for a proposed Mitchell Food Heritage Center, a modern facility with exhibition spaces, demonstration kitchens, research archives, and educational resources. The vision combined museum-quality preservation with practical knowledge transmission. Accompanying documentation outlined potential locations, operational structures, and programming concepts, all with characteristic attention to detail while leaving room for our implementation decisions. He thought of everything, Marcus observed, reviewing the business plan. Endowment structure, governance model, educational partnerships. This was clearly years in development. But he kept it separate from company succession planning, Igu noted. He didn't want this mixed with business considerations or family dynamics around Mitchell Fine Foods. The insight explained much about my father's compartmentalized approach to estate planning, ensuring his commercial, personal, and cultural legacies would each receive appropriate attention without conflicting priorities. As we concluded our initial exploration, Marcus turned to me with unexpected directness. This would be an incredible project. The question is, can we work together effectively given our history? The question acknowledged both the opportunity and the challenge. Our relationship had improved significantly since the contentious succession period, but collaborative leadership would require deeper reconciliation and mutual respect. I believe we can, I replied after consideration. You understand public engagement and relationship building better than I ever will. I bring content knowledge and organizational structure. Those complementary strengths are exactly what this project needs. The following day, the actual anniversary of our father's death, Marcus and I met at our mother's new condominium to discuss the Heritage Center concept. Her perspective as our father's longtime partner offered valuable insight into his intentions. He talked about something like this for years, she confirmed, reviewing the architectural renderings, especially after visiting specialty producers whose techniques were disappearing with older generations. He worried that industrialization was erasing cultural knowledge alongside traditional methods. Why keep it separate from the company? Marcus wondered. Because he recognized the commercial pressures that would inevitably affect Mitchell Foods, she explained. He wanted this cultural preservation to exist independent of business constraints. Her insight illuminated my father's strategic separation of company succession from cultural preservation, ensuring each could fulfill its purpose without compromising the other. Over the following months, Marcus and I worked together developing implementation plans for the Mitchell Food Heritage Center. Despite our different approaches, his emphasis on public engagement, my focus on scholarly integrity, we found productive common ground in honoring our father's vision while adding our own perspectives. The collaboration proved unexpectedly rewarding for both of us. Marcus demonstrated greater appreciation for substantive content than I had previously recognized, while I developed more comfort with public-facing aspects of the project. Our complementary strengths created balance that neither could have achieved individually. 1 year later, 3 years after our father's death and 2 years after the sale of Mitchell Fine Foods, we stood together at the opening reception for the Mitchell Food Heritage Center. The renovated warehouse in Boston's former manufacturing district combined industrial architecture with modern museum facilities, exhibition spaces showcasing our father's collections alongside research, archives, demonstration kitchens, and educational facilities. The guest list reflected diverse food communities, artisanal producers, culinary historians, food science researchers, chefs, educators, and cultural preservationists. My mother moved confidently among them, sharing stories about my father's passion for food traditions with evident pride. He would be pleased, Elena Vidal commented, joining me at the edge of the gathering. She had flown from Madrid specifically for the opening, recognizing its significance in my personal journey. Not just with the center itself, but with seeing you and Marcus collaborating effectively. It's been surprisingly rewarding, I acknowledged. We've each grown significantly since the succession conflict. Which is precisely what your father anticipated, I suspect. He created space for necessary separation before introducing potential reconciliation. Her observation captured my father's wisdom, understanding that family bonds required transformation rather than mere preservation. The painful succession process had allowed each family member to establish independent identity before reconnecting, on new terms. Across the room, Marcus was engaged in animated conversation with potential donors, his natural charm complemented by genuine passion for the center's mission. We had discovered unexpected synergy in this shared project. His relationship-building skills paired with my organizational vision creating something neither could have accomplished alone. My mother approached, champagne glass in hand. "Congratulations, darling. This exceeds anything your father imagined." "Thank you. That means a great deal." I glanced around the vibrant gathering. I think he would be pleased to see how many communities have come together around this vision. He would indeed. She touched my arm affectionately. But he would be most pleased by what you've built independently. Connect Food. That represents genuine innovation rather than mere preservation. Her acknowledgement, connecting my professional achievements to my father's values while recognizing their distinctiveness, completed a circle that began with conflict 2 years earlier. Later that evening, after most guests had departed, I found myself alone in the main exhibition hall. Display cases housed my father's carefully preserved artifacts, handcrafted cooking implements, historical recipes, documented food traditions, while interactive screens provided context and connection to living practitioners. The Mitchell Food Heritage Center represented one kind of legacy, preservation of cultural knowledge and traditions. Connect Food North America represented another, innovation that respected craft while creating new possibilities. Together, they embodied complementary values my father had lived, honoring tradition while embracing necessary change. In the quiet gallery, surrounded by manifestations of both preservation and innovation, I recognized the journey's full circle. The painful rupture that began with my mother's words, "Your brother deserves the company more," had created space for each family member to discover more authentic paths. My mother had moved beyond defining herself solely through her husband's company. Marcus had found professional fulfillment without the burden of inherited expectations. And I had created something aligned with my values while drawing on my experience. The company was gone, but something more valuable remained: the freedom to honor legacy through choice rather than obligation. As I prepared to leave, I noticed a small display case I hadn't seen before. Inside was a handwritten note from my father dated shortly before his death, placed alongside his favorite tasting spoon, a simple wooden implement worn smooth by decades of use. The note read, "True inheritance isn't what we leave behind, but what we inspire others to create." Those words captured the essence of both my professional and personal journey. The sale that once seemed like an ending had become a beginning. The family conflict that felt like rupture had enabled growth. The legacy that appeared threatened had transformed into something more authentic and enduring. Outside the Heritage Center, the spring evening was mild and clear. Boston's skyline glittered against the darkening sky as I walked toward the waterfront. In 2 days, I would fly to Chicago to meet with potential partners for Connect Food's Midwest expansion. The following week would bring the James Beard Awards ceremony in New York, where our distribution innovation would receive formal recognition. My phone buzzed with a message from Elena. "Board unanimously approved funding for Midwest Hub. Congratulations on continued expansion." The future stretched before me with possibilities I couldn't have imagined when sitting across from my mother at that painful family dinner, hearing her declare my brother more deserving of our family company. She hadn't known then that I had already sold it, a decision that would transform all our lives in unexpected ways. I smiled at the memory, no longer painful but instructive. Sometimes the end of one story creates space for better ones to begin. Sometimes losing what you thought you wanted leads to discovering what you truly need. And sometimes the most valuable inheritance isn't a company or property or even money. It's the courage to create your own path and the wisdom to recognize when letting go is the greatest form of honoring what came before. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.